We're speaking with Sally Smith of Buffalo Wild Wings. She's one of the Food Channel pros, Leaders with Guts. Sally, do you think menu labeling is going to change in any way the way your customers order their items?
Well, that's a great question, and certainly one of the things that you read about daily in the industry publications. We already have menu labeling in New York, and we have franchisees there where the calorie information is posted right on the menu. I think it's going to change how the way some people order their food. Certainly, you and I are going to take a look at the calories, or at least I am, and I'm going to say, okay, did I work out this morning? But seriously, I'm going to make choices. Probably I myself am going to make better choices. I don't know that anyone is for menu labeling, but I do think I am for having a consistent message from city to city and state to state. So that's, to me, what menu labeling allows us to do. I think the young guys are still going to come in and eat wings and drink beer.
What other legislative threats really concern you now?
I think there's a lot of things facing the industry. Top of mind is, it's not really a legislative threat because it's passed, but certainly the health care. I think how that gets implemented is going to be very important. You know, the industry employs over 13 million individuals, and a lot of those are part-time individuals. A lot of them are high school, and teenagers in high school. For a lot of people, it's their first job. So how is the rules and the regulations surrounding healthcare going to be written? What will be considered a part-time employee? One thing that's well known is the restaurant industry has very low margins, and so as you pile on additional costs that restaurants have to cover, it can only come from one place. One, either your bottom line, and if there is no bottom line, will it put people out of business, or two, increase prices to the consumer. So healthcare. I think what other regulations could impact business, certainly the Employee Free Choice Act, which has been talked about in I guess taking away the secret ballot and determining whether you're going to be unionized or not. I think what makes the restaurant industry unique and Buffalo Wild Wings is we offer a tremendous amount of flexibility in scheduling. And people come to us, and so having a rigid set of guidelines on when you can or can't work would certainly affect the industry. I think we'd like to see some immigration reform. We're going to face a shortage of people that available to work in the industry as we look at how we're at some of the numbers that we're going to need, and so where are those people going to come from? And
you talk about the low margins in the restaurant industry. The public is really unaware of that. I mean, if you ask somebody, they think there's huge markups in restaurants. They really don't understand that. Is that a problem?
You know, I think it's something that it would certainly help if we educate the public. If you take let's say I'm going to sell a hamburger, and I sell that hamburger for $5, and maybe that has French fries and things like that. The profit on that hamburger, on a $5 hamburger, is about 20 cents. I don't think people realize that your cost of sales the hamburger itself and the food represent about 30% of costs. The labor associated, not the tips, but the labor cost is another 26 to 28%. Then it's the rent, the depreciation, the equipment. It all comes down to a very low margin.
Do you think the image of the restaurant industry is improving?
I'd like to see it improve, and I think that the National Restaurant Association has done a good job of identifying that as a need. You know, the restaurants and restaurateurs are the first people on site in any kind of catastrophe, whether it's a flooding river in Tennessee, whether it's Hurricane Katrina, whether it's raising money for starving children. We're the first ones there, and we need to get out and tell that story. We are very connected to communities.
Sally, you mentioned the health care legislation. What specifically is Buffalo Wild Wings doing to prepare?
Well, we're trying to take a look at what we currently offer and who we offer it to, and how do we extend that program to where the healthcare legislation has talked about at part-time employees at 30 hours. Help identify gaps in coverage and really try to run some pro formas on what it's going to do to the bottom line, as well as help our franchisees understand. And are there ways that we can, pool together to work through and understand the legislation? I think most important right now is trying to understand and staying very abreast of what is included in the regulations that are going to be written.
And what do you think the restaurant industry as a whole does really well, and what do you think it could improve?
I think that the restaurant industry as a whole, what we do really well is understand the communities we're in. I think we work very closely. I think we fill a need, whether it's fill a need for food on a busy day, whether it's an opportunity to get together and celebrate. It's a gathering place, both Buffalo Wild Wings and the industry. I think we do that very well. I think where we need to improve, and I think it's probably in the public relations around the restaurant industry. I think it's something like 1 in 4 Americans has worked at a restaurant at some point in their life. It's often your first job, and sometimes, unfortunately, here it's your job of last resort. If I can't do this, I can always get a job in the restaurant industry. Or if I'm talking to people, they'll say, I'm just doing this till I get a real job. And I think that the restaurant industry needs to get out there and talk about the opportunity that whether you're working in a restaurant, whether you desire to own a restaurant, there's tremendous opportunity. And so tooting our own horn, I think, is what we need to do better.
In Minnesota, Tom Emmer is looking to replace Tim Pawlenty in the governor's mansion. And he believes that the minimum wage should be lowered for tipped employees, which obviously would affect restaurant workers more than any other industry. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that there has been a tremendous amount of publicity around the comments made by Tom Emmer. I think they're a little bit misunderstood, and Minnesota is one of 7 states that doesn't have the tip credit. The other 43 states, employers pay a less than minimum wage because they're able to take into consideration the tips that employees make. And I think one of the things that is probably not very well known is servers and bartenders often make more than a manager does in a restaurant because of the tips. So I think what he was trying to say is in order to put more people to work, in order to help encourage growth in the restaurant industry in Minnesota, we need to have business owners have an incentive to build more restaurants. And part of that was by following the practices of 43 other states, and that is having a lower than minimum wage.
I think that's interesting because it shows that there's a lot of depth below the headlines on some of these stories. They're a lot more complex than 6-word headlines could ever get across.
Right. One of the things that I always say when I'm talking about the industry or I'm talking about Buffalo Wild Wings is I'm amazed food ever gets to the table in any restaurant. Because of all the things that have to go right along the way. And that is the story. People think that restaurants make an enormous amount of money. I think they look at the sale price and not think of everything that goes behind it.
We've been talking with Sally Smith of Buffalo Wild Wings and the Vice Chairman of the National Restaurant Association. Check out the next part of this series as we explore what it takes to be a leader with guts. For Food Channel Pro, I'm Ellen Codiff.